Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be doing my 14.17 support tier list. So for content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There were a couple of changes this patch, primarily nerfs towards Senna, Seraphine, Pyke, LeBlanc, and Ashe. A lot of these were either from the champions being progressively picked up a bit more. In Senna's case, she was overbuffed in 14.16, so we've quite heavily pulled back on those. She's still very strong at the moment and has different build variations, which we'll talk about when we get to her. Seraphine has gradually been picking up more more players and just doing better throughout the kind of like split at this point. She has been doing a bit better in the bot lane role, and she was OP there. In the support role, she was like an S tier pick, like a high S tier, and she was doing really successfully on a variety of like enchanter variations. LeBlanc is a hidden OP support. She had been in 14.16 one of the best snowball supports for solo queue. You could really comfortably 1v9 with this champion from the support role. It obviously was directed towards mid lane, but it does have a knock-on effect of nerfing support LeBlanc. It's arguably better than Zoe support at the moment, like a better Zoe support, even though Zoe support is obviously very unpopular to the point where she isn't really even played here. Zoe support is better than mid lane Zoe in her current state, at least for average solo queue, as it tends to be a bit harder to pilot these champions in mid lane, where you do have different things to kind of like play around, but then obviously you get the bonus of having additional economy. Other champions which got nerfed, obviously we saw Pyke get nerfed and Ashe get nerfed. These two were champions were, well, in Pyke's case doing really well in Elite, and in Ashe's case she was overperforming as an ADC, so he took down her base health slightly. Let's cover the tier list then. To begin with, the D tier stays relatively similar, bar a champion who has moved out of it. So Twitch, MF, both these champions, very underperforming in the support role. In Ashe's case, she has been underperforming in the support role for a while now, especially within solo queue. Malphite is a very gimmicky pick, obviously reliant around his ultimate and kind of harassing people out with Q early on into the game. Veigar, also pretty gimmicky, doesn't really find a lot of success here, especially with the changes they made to him back along, where they push a lot of his abilities to level scaling. Champion moving up is Hui. Hui has gradually been improving within the support role. The buffs in 14.18 will also help him here, and I could definitely see a chance for this champion to see some play in Worlds, possibly from the likes of Carrier and maybe even Mickey X. There's definitely potential for this champion as a support. It's not going to be as good as like bot lane Hui, which should be overpowered in 14.18. I'd really recommend going and playing that. For mid lane Hui, he's like a solid B A tier pick. Obviously he's a bit harder to pilot, but yeah, I'd really recommend playing him in the bot lane at the moment, even though he still has some of the weaknesses he does in the mid lane. It's nowhere near as polarizing. He doesn't have the opportunity to be like assassinated as quickly, especially if he's playing like around the support quickly. There's definitely a lot of strengths to bot lane Hui, but as I'm talking about support Hui at the moment, it's on the rise, but it's still a pretty low down pick at the moment. The other three champions in the C tier are Yuumi, who isn't unplayable at the moment. She's definitely doing better than she has been for like the majority of time after her rework, but she's still definitely underperformed. She's gated by what she can be played with, very reliant on hit champions. The meta's really bad for her, like she doesn't like sitting on Jhin, MF. I believe the other champion, Varus, also pairs really poorly with Yuumi at the moment, and he's like for free considered elite popular strong ADCs of the patch at the moment. Some of her pairings are obviously more reliant on like on hit and getting a lot of value out of her W and her Q crit scaling healing. I believe that's how that would function, and yeah, she definitely is more reliant on these pairings. In Swain's case, he's doing a bit better at the moment. He's probably the closest champion to jumping out of the C tier into the B tier. A lot of nerfs towards the Warmogs champions, like in the support role, combined with some of the other champions which have been rising up a bit in popularity. He's definitely given him a bit of strength here. He still underperforms though. I'm not quite willing to jump him into the B tier at the moment, but if you're like on the edge about like where you want to play him, how you want to play him, where you want to play him, what games, I'd really recommend just playing him in games where like enemy comp is short range and you can really utilize the full extent of his ultimate and his kit. Kind of akin to just mid lane and bot lane Swain, but you're not going to have the same level of economy. You're more reliant on just like rely one item, spike him, and utilizing that to stick to people and yeah, be a solid support option. The other champion here is Renata. Renata's been underperforming for a while at this point, also kind of gatekept by her pairings. She needs champions which synergize well with W. Once again, doesn't pair well with Varus, MF, Jhin. She isn't as like it isn't as rough as the likes of Yumi, and like on hit Varus does pair really nicely with both these champions, but the lethality variation obviously doesn't, and that is what is really dominating this patch at the moment. Moving on to the B tier, so the champions here might be interesting for a lot of people. I'm actually going to lead with Nautilus. I think Nautilus should be demoted to the C tier. I think the perception around this champion is really off from his actual power level at the moment. People see, like, I mean, well, people obviously know about the Warmog's nerfs and like how they obviously to a degree affect these champions, but Nautilus has really been tanking a lot of these nerfs, and over time has definitely dropped down quite substantially, and he's pretty close to being a C tier pick. Honestly, in 40.18, if the numbers don't suddenly shoot up, I think this champion deserves to be demoted down to the C tier. Alongside him, we have the likes of Alistar and Rakan. Rakan has just been underperforming for a while. He's not really doing as well with the current itemization. I do think Trailblazer is an item which really could do with being buffed to like help Rakan out a bit. He also got nerfed, I believe, going into this split, and has just been on a steady decline from like my S tier down to like my low B tier at this point. In Alistar's case, also got nerfed because of the Warmog's changes. A lot of these champions just don't have that great follow-up options. Nightfall isn't bad in a lot of situations, but not every game is a Nightfall game, obviously. Some do have Zeeks, and like oftentimes you will see like Alistar and Rakan go Zeeks in a lot of situations. Pyke drops down into the B tier as well. He also got punished because of his, well, I mean, he got hit because of his nerfs. He was overperforming in elite solo queue. He was doing fine in average solo queue. Obviously, he's a very, very early game skew champion, incredibly reliant on snowballing. If you can't consistently do that, avoid the champion. If you're confident on it, then you can definitely find these angles still, and like the nerfs don't really change whether you want to play Pyke, but it does make him a bit more squishy, losing some of that armor. The other champions within the B tier, so we have Teemo, which is a gimmicky pick, but pretty slept on in the support role at the moment. The Q definitely has a lot of value. He scales incredibly aggressively. He's very low elo skewed, obviously, and as this is average elo, he does start dropping down a bit. But yeah, this champ's definitely slept on. Bard could arguably also be dropped down to the C tier in his current state. He's not finding the same level of success as he was in the previous split. Nico also not doing that well at the moment. Some of the itemization has definitely been beneficial towards her. The likes of Rocket Belt being buffed did definitely give her some more traction of a support role, but she's just been generalistically underperforming across the board, even with some of the indirect buffs she's received through the item system. Pantheon has been doing okay as a support for a while now. Obviously, the health ratio changes fairly neutral for him. It allows him to opt into some more durable items. Obviously, when you're playing him support, you tend to see a lot of Umbral Glaive or Edge of Night, stuff like this, which the buffs don't really benefit as much, even though Edge obviously is still quite a nice item on him. I think Umbral Glaive Pantheon is just something you should avoid, and you should opt into some of his other options. Cleaver is great for shred pairings, where you can, like, you're playing alongside like a really heavy AD marksman, something like a Draven, for example, where the value of Cleaver is really amplified with a champion like that. Morgana can be useful. I think this champion is underrated, but there's definitely like it's underrated for the correct reasons in a way, where like it's very telegraphed. Her W feels really useless in the support role. Her Q needs a lot of setup. The Black Shield can feel kind of fake in situations. There's a lot of like issues with Morgana, but this champion's definitely not doing like as poorly as a lot of people say it is, and I think it deserves like a higher B tier spot at the moment. Amumu, his ease of play combined with his like really heavy CC kit definitely gives him a bit of value in the support role, albeit his itemization is pretty weak at the moment, but you can opt into things like Zeeks. The loss of Even Shroud is the main big hitter here, and if they were to lower the mana cost of Q back down slightly, I could definitely see support Amumu once again take off, possibly. Camille, very stable, reliant support. It's kind of like a better version, not a better version. It's kind of on par with Pyke. It's just a bit more niche. Pyke is obviously a lot more heavily mained and a lot more heavily played in the support role. Camille, not anywhere near as much. She has been nerfed a couple of times to kind of try and take up the support role, but she's definitely still viable here, and her Halo Blades variations can give her a lot of kill threat in certain lane matchups. Karma doing a bit better at the moment. The buffs she received continuously over a couple of patches have definitely pushed her up to being a more viable support option. Being able to do a lot of damage early on into the game with Q can really hurt a lot of lanes from either scaling or being able to really fight back against you. Falling back into the play pattern of Emaxing and then playing around that big AoE shield definitely gives her a bit more control over the game and a bit more value. So she definitely rises up as like a high beta option at the moment. Blitzcrank has really fallen off. I think that's just the best way of describing him. He went from being someone who I would consistently say should be like an S tier pick. This champion is like a go-to support pick for a lot of players. It's like I'm auto-filled, I need a hook option. Oh, I'll play Blitzcrank kind of champion. He's easy to pick up. He's a really simple like play pattern, but he's just not been doing that well recently. He has been nerfed more than I think he should have been generalistically, and has been hit by the item system just being a bit weaker for him at the moment. And yeah, he drops down to the B tier in my opinion, like at the moment in my opinion. And yeah, I think it's a bit too low for where he should be. Fresh has been bad for a while. Like he still holds on as like a B tier champion, but you have to sink a lot of time into this pick. Yeah, he's really taxing, and oftentimes he's a bit more reliant on pairings. Like you really want to get a lot of value out of that lantern. And there's definitely strengths to this pick still. Like if you can consistently land your hooks and the cooldown refund on that, albeit not as aggressive as it has been in the past, where like we all remember the Q into Q with Lucidity Boots, Rush Fresh being incredibly obnoxious to play against. That isn't anywhere near as prevalent at the moment, but yeah, the champion's definitely a bit on the downwards, but he's still a B tier pick, like a low B tier pick at the moment. Just not something I'd really recommend. I've already spoken about Nautilus. I think this champion is very close to the C tier in his current state. Moving on to the A tier. Actually, I've got one more champion for the B tier. Heimerdinger. Someone in the comment section on 14.16 was asking what Heimerdinger is. He's still playable in the support role. Obviously, he got nerfed quite aggressively when like the Ashe Heimerdinger era at Worlds, because of just how powerful the lane pushing power of these two picks were. He's not that anymore because of the nerfs towards his turrets, which like now means they're really squishy and susceptible to just being destroyed. He requires a bit more gold. He tends to be a bit better of a scaling pick, and you tend to at a Q-max. And I believe at that time you were like still W-maxing on Heimerdinger. The champion can still function as a support. He's like a B tier option at the moment, like a mid B tier, I would say. Moving on to the A tier event, so we have Lulu, who is being buffed in 14.18, but is also pretty hurt by the current meta as well, akin to the likes of Yumi and Renata, but she is still performant with some of the other picks, whereas they're not doing as well just generalistically. Obviously, Jhin, MF, Varus, once again, all pretty weak picks with her, but she can function with a lot of the other ADC pool. Fiddlesticks, very gimmicky. Not on my list, but I know a lot of people like Fiddlestick support as being like as an option, and I definitely do think this champion has potential to a degree. So he does sit towards the low end of my A tier as well. He can definitely function as like a gimmicky, like a niche OTP pick in a lot of situations. Zilean has the two build options, the tank and the Enchanter variation, or Enchanter being more of like a CDR variation, obviously. It's actually more leaning into AP. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent here. Zilean sits as like a low A tier option. He's definitely been better in the past. He's probably in one of his weaker spots over the last 3 years since I've like really been doing these videos. And yeah, he's more of like a low A tier pick in his current state. Tahm Kench used to be a hater. Now he's actually in a pretty good spot. He's definitely benefited where a lot of the other melee supports have kind of fallen down. He's been indirectly buffed because of top lane Tahm Kench, which has like gotten a lot of love over like the last year. That being through like AP ratios or just health ratios, stuff like that has already benefited him. Zac also doing relatively well as a support, also not here. Some of the more niche options I just forget to re-add, but yeah, like Zac also doing pretty well at the moment as like a support engage option. I played with Trimby in an in-house fairly recently. We lost, which was unfortunate, but the Zac pick had a lot of potential and did a lot, and was quite valuable. Galio and Shen also pretty slept on support picks. Shen's support is going to be my pick to watch going into 14.18. Definitely think there's a lot of potential for this champion in the support role, especially if you are going like Heartsteel variations, which can function in the support role at the moment for the likes of Tahm Kench and Shen. Malco, on the downward, and with the 14.18 nerfs, I do think this champion will drop down to the B tier again, so I'd kind of avoid him. Braum also kind of on the downwards, the less of the engaged support roster we see, the worse Braum does as a champion. He's very reliant as just being an answer into that. If you pick him into enchanters, you will most likely lose the game, so try to avoid that where you can. Sona also being a bit on the downward, but she's a very solid pick and can have a really good mid-game into late-game transition. There's definitely a lot of potential to this champion and her ability to have AoE heals, akin to like Seraphine, who kind of sits next to her now. Like, I'd say both these champions are pretty solid A-tier support picks, especially if you want a lot of AoE shielding, healing, crowd control, and they have relatively similar tools. I'd just take Seraphine if you're looking for a bit more damage and crowd control, Sona if you're just looking for a bit more healing, arguably damage amp, and shielding capability. But yeah, both these picks solid A-tier champions at the moment. Soraka still very valuable for her healing capabilities, and compare quite nicely with the likes of Ashe, who is obviously on the downwards at the moment, but can still function with a couple of the other ADC pairings. Vel'Koz, a great mage option for support role, next to Xerath, who is also doing pretty well. Both these are very solid artillery support picks at the moment, especially within solo queue. Both of them do function quite well in the mid lane at the moment as well, so you can kind of flex them between when you need. Lux, just generically a good support option, more reliant on like snare pairings and snowballing. I mean, to a degree, all three of them are. I'd say Lux is probably just the most gatekept by that, and just needing to get gold to really look for these one-shot kill angles with like QER passive rotation combos. But if you find them, then yeah, she can be really valuable within the game, especially with the correct pairings. Shaco, it really slept on support. I do think this pick has a lot of potential, which people kind of sleep on at the moment. Rel, also on the decline at the moment. Warmog's nerfs also hit her. She now drops from like a high A tier option to a low A tier option. The 14.18 nerfs to her should probably drop her down to the B tier, so she would definitely take a tag there. Celestial Opposition also got nerfed this patch, which is a direct support nerf, so some of the other champions in this list have definitely been tagged by that. So the ones which weren't going this item have just naturally been bumped up slightly. Rakan was one of the biggest losers of Celestial Opposition being nerfed, but yeah, Shaco heavily steps on support, definitely like a high A tier option at the moment. LeBlanc still stays in the S. I mean, I think LeBlanc probably drops down to the A tier now, actually. She's like high A, low S tier. If you can snowball, she can still be the same valuable support as she was last patch. She just doesn't snowball as aggressively. She can't quite 1v9 games as aggressively as before, but she's still quite valuable. Especially, yeah, if you're getting the kills, getting the gold, able to just really use your advantage to just take out the ADC or take out the support in the game, or even just take out either the jungler or mid laner in certain situations. She can be really valuable in that regard. Moving on to the S tier, Leona sinks from the top of the S tier to like the low end of the S tier now. The nerfs to Warmogs hit her this patch. She's being nerfed in 14.18 as well, and she'll probably drop down to the A tier, but for the moment she sits as like a low S tier option. Just be cognitive of the changes next patch. Tarik, great in the situations where you get a lot of value out of his kit, being the ultimate and the E. If you're not able to find them, then he definitely loses a lot of value, but the kit is so strong in the situations where it is playable, then it just like jumps him up as like a low S tier option, just not like a high S tier or S plus. And I don't think Tarik will ever be that high S tier S plus option, as he's so unpopular, and yeah, he's only really played in those scenarios which really benefit him. The carry options, still the same. The Zyras, the Brands, these picks are great for solo queue, chaos, and just the amount of DPS they can output. The two champions have obviously been nerfed for like other roles, whether that's mid lane in Brand's case and jungle, or jungle primarily for Zyra. Both these picks, yeah, definitely doing quite well at the moment in the support role as carry options. Nami is the closest champion to move up into the S plus tier. She sits as a high S tier option. I was surprised back along when they buffed her, like in 14.13, I want to say, and I still am. Like, those buffs were just overkill at the time, and she's definitely, like, really still benefiting from those, as she has been an S tier pick for the last 3 or 4 patches ever since she did receive those buffs. So Nami, really good in her current state, obviously has a great amount of pairings which can really utilize her E to its full extent. Senna drops down from the S plus tier to the, actually no, she doesn't though. Senna is still an S plus champion. Like, if you're going the cleaver variation now, with like the nerfs to the AP variation, she's still an incredibly strong champion. She's obviously a bit weaker, like she drops from like the best champion in the game in 14.16 to just below Poppy. Obviously, I've managed to skip 2 champions here, but yeah, Milio, Jana wrap up the S tier. Milio's case, he's been doing pretty well ever since his changes not too long ago. They were pretty neutral, but he still benefited from them. That being like the AP ratio and the Q, it just allows him to snowball a bit more aggressively within the game. Jana, obviously great into heavy engage, where she can utilize her Q, her ultimate, and her E-Shield is great on like heavy AD champions, which I really rely on AD to snowball the game. And then Poppy. Poppy is the pick of the patch at the moment. She's been pick of the patch in a way, other than Senna, obviously, in 14.16. She's been pick of the patch for like 6 patches. So yeah, Poppy really slept on champion. I'm glad people are like becoming more aware of how powerful she is into like matchups where she can just completely shut down the enemy support's either engage or ability to just utilize its tools. Rel, obviously a great example of like if a Rel W's into you, you use your W, you can basically just permanently deny Rel engage, and she can be great for shutting down a heavy like a lot of junglers. She can be great for shutting down lanes just entirely with her Hail Blades and ability to just flash E someone into a wall and then like look to blow up a target with her marksman. She's really valuable at the moment, and I definitely do think she should be nerfed, but she isn't. So 14.18, still a great patch to play Poppy. Play for the rest of this patch. Obviously, in 14.19, we are receiving the item overhaul / changes. I guess it's just changes for the most part. Yeah, she should be affected by that. But maybe she still stays strong. So it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, Poppy, recommended go-to champion at the moment. Pay attention to Shen in 14.18. Senna is still a very good champion. And yeah, those are my thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.